Hey parents, let's talk chronic ear infections. Let's just talk ear infections and what's really causing them in the first place. Let's get you the answers that honestly you should be getting in the pediatrician's office, the urgent care, the ER, because ear infections and respiratory infections as a whole are one of the top three reasons, for visits to the pediatrician in the emergency room. It happens millions of times for millions of kids every single year. And we've been dealing with this and we actually, even known the science behind ear infections and what's really causing them for a long time. We know that they're not bacterial. So we know that they're vastly still today with data and information and research all over the place. We know today we're vastly overusing antibiotics and opening up a whole other can of worms for your kids' chronic challenges later on. But this conversation for you, it's because if you've been up late at night just watching for, your kiddo struggle, not being able to sleep, fever, pulling on the ears, you better believe that pulls on your heartstrings. This video is really for you. If your kid who is struggling with chronic or recurrent ear infections, and you're going through this again and again, and every time the weather shifts, or they get into teething a little bit, that a cold, congestion, ear infections, antibiotics are coming. And hopefully we found this for you before, but even if we did after, this video will still help you. Hopefully we found it before multiple rounds of antibiotics. Not only didn't it fix the issue but made it worse, and then your kiddo went for ear tube surgery. Even if your child has had chronic ear infections to the degree of having one, two, we've had patients at our office have 4 rounds of tubes put in. Number 3 and number 4 were supposedly permanent tubes that his body rejected and kicked out because nothing that antibiotics do and nothing that surgeries do, anything to get to the root cause of what's really causing ear infections, which is exactly what we're going to break down in this video. So what I want to do is make this a very educational, very simple video for you to make sense of. But we're going to make sure we talk you through the real anatomy, the neurophysiology, and give you the real science behind what's going on with chronic ear infections. So let's switch over to my iPad for just a second and let's review what I would like to call the 3 predominant theories that are out there. So number 1 is what we call the medical theory. Now, the medical theory really, it's crazy that I still got to go through this, but the standard pediatrician is going to explain away chronic or even acute ear infections to parents and just say, your kid's ear, their eustachian tube is just probably a little more horizontal than it should be and a little shorter or whatever than it should be. Our kids are not designed to have anything dysfunctioning. Our kids are not designed to have infections or illnesses coming in. Gravity has very little to do with actually draining the fluid out of the ears. And the most important take home from this video is that moving fluid through the ears relies on that exact word, movement. It has little to do with gravity. So this whole medical theory that's still, decades later, that's still rolling out there again and again. It's just crazy and not even close to being what's really going on. The science behind what's causing chronic ear infections is really simple. It's really black and white. And in this, this iPad, in these 5 minutes, I'm going to explain it to you. And I promise we'll get you in a direction that you need to go to get your kiddo to the place where they can get through these chronic ear infections and get healthy and resilient again without antibiotics, without more surgeries. Now, the second theory, and I'm going to give this kind of like a half mark because, I'm not crossing it all the way out, kind of like this one here. So what we call the natural health theory. Now, as chiropractors, we're all about natural health, nutritional health, okay, and so forth. But in a lot of families, once you've probably gone through a couple rounds of antibiotics where you're facing tubes and you definitely don't want to have, your kiddo to go the surgery route, you've probably gone gluten-free, casein-free, red dye, 40 free, because You probably got online awesomely and accurately and read that inflammation is the root of ear infections. Inflammation is the root of respiratory infections. And inflammation is often caused by, not healthy foods, gluten, dairy, those sort of things. That is an absolute accurate theory. And there's some really good neurophysiology behind that, but it's incomplete. The whole concept around dairy and toxins and food allergies, it's absolutely part of the puzzle, but it's just not the whole puzzle. What we find again and again, so we're gonna switch this over to, let's say, green here. What we find again and again uh, with this one is that we've got to go with what we find all the time. And I promise, even though it says neuroscience to it, we're gonna keep it really simple. What is really causing so many chronic ear infections is just simply poor plumbing, poor drainage. And we're gonna go into this diagram here on this diagram next, and there's a little nerve that sits right here at the junction between the eardrum and the inner ear, the eustachian tube, and what this sinus cavity is. So the inner ear, the eustachian tube, the sinus cavity, we have these nerves and we have these little muscles that sit here, and this is the plumbing. These are the pipes. The eustachian tube is here, and the way God designed us is the ears are supposed to drain into the sinus cavity, into the lymphatics, the throat, the lungs, and then all the way down into the stomach where there's a ton of acidity, tons of probiotics, tons of good guys that kill off the bad guys. So yes, stuff is going to come into the ear for our kiddos. It's going to get into the ear, right? And then there's another thing. There's teething, there's irritation coming in from this side as well. These things can happen over there. And when that happens, is we can end up with inflammation on both sides of this equation, right? But there's actually, there's more fluid that's going to get into the inner, and that's okay, right? It's okay because as this very important, this little tiny muscle right here, called the tensor veli palatini, the TVP is its nickname, and as long as that muscle can continue to move, it can continue to massage and move that fluid out of the ear. And even if it's got more fluid in there because of a cold or teething or a seasonal shift, well, then you would want that TVP to move and move more. Well, we're not done explaining the neuroscience behind this because we got one more piece to this, and that's these nerves over here, the C1 and C2, these nerve roots, okay? They're there, these spinal nerves that branch from the very top of the spinal cord right around the brain stem and the base of the skull. And it's the tone or the function of those nerves that control the movement of the muscles. That's how every part of our body works, including the inner ear and this little tiny muscle here, the TVP. And so what happens is if there's neuromuscular misalignment, neuromuscular tension, neurological interference that occurs, now those three things, that neuromuscular misalignment, that neuromuscular tension, that neuromuscular interference of communication and function, there's a catch-all word for that, and it's called a subluxation. Those three components, they make up a subluxation, and that's what shuts down the plumbing and it promotes inflammation. And there's a whole nother layer to this neurology that you can read about on our website about subluxation, that once that neuromuscular tension it builds in, not only can the fluid not drain, but the whole nervous system goes into what's called sympathetic fight or flight dominance, which is a very pro-inflammatory state. It limits the immune system and the respiratory system's ability to get rid of infections, to get rid of inflammation, and to get rid of congestion. So that's why chronic ear infections are a vicious cycle of this neuromuscular neuroimmune issue. And so what causes the final thing that we've got to go through on this iPad with this video, right? So subluxation, right? First time hearing it. Misalignment, tension, poor plumbing, inflammation, neurological interference. That's one word, right? Subluxation does all of those things. And one of the first places it sets up shop generally for babies and infants and toddlers is with chronic ear infections. It's one of the first signs of subluxation being present in what's called the upper neck, the upper cervical C1, C2. It can be in the cranial system and elsewhere, but really we find that subluxation showing up in these two areas right here, C1, C2. So the last question is, well, what causes subluxation in the first place? And we see three things. First off, the baby's neck may be misaligned because of a breech or in utero constrained presentation, right? Second, there may be birth interventions like forceps, vacuum induction, or emergency C-section. They're all clinically correlated with a much higher incidence of not just 1 or 2 ear infections, but specifically chronic ear infections. And number three, now we're back to our equation from before, which is, toxins and dairy and gluten, sugar, that sort of stuff. But here's what, I wanted to put all together for you. Most families have figured out right away that the pediatrician, like, there's got to be more to it than that. If your mom gut tells you as you listen to the pediatrician say that they're just shorter eustachian tubes, they're more horizontal, and you're like, I don't know. It seems like there's more going on than that. You were right. And so probably you went down the road of cleaning up your diet, getting rid of the dairy, getting rid of the sugar, that sort of stuff. And maybe your kiddo is a little bit better, but not all the way clear. Maybe they still get sick too often. Maybe they still get congested too often. They still get chronic ear infections too often. Well, then you know for sure that it's subluxation. And when we dig into those case histories, we almost always find those two things. Often, they even lead to something called torticollis or plagiocephaly. We have some great articles about those things on our website too. And if your child had one or both of those as well, then they're definitely on the path to chronic ear infection challenges as well. So I wanted to do with this video is not just break down the science, the anatomy, the physiology, and be able to contrast against, the medical theory, the natural theory behind chronic ear infections, and get to the real root neuroscience and the real deep down root cause. But once again, the final question is, all right, what do I do about that? Well, the first step you want to take from this video right away is, if you're local to us, come see us at Rising Health Family Chiropractic. Click the link below to read the whole article about chronic ear infections. We have another awesome article, Natural Remedies, which obviously it starts with chiropractic for ear infections. But the reason you want to start with chiropractic is you've got to get that subluxation out of the way. So the first thing we do is we dig into your child's case history and we find out, okay, are we dealing with some sort, these subluxation triggers and elements? And the second thing we do with all of our new patients, struggling with chronic ear infections, is we run what's called an insight scan, and we can actually measure, quantify, and locate that neurological interference. We can measure and find the inflammation, the tension within these nerves and the muscles, and we can literally put it on the map and say, there it is, that's what's causing it. And then we make safe, gentle, easy, you won't even believe how easy they are, adjustments to get that fluid moving. We can make these soft, gentle, light touch pediatric adjustments to get that fluid out of the ear, to get the nervous system back to balance, to get everything back to the way it needs to be, to not only get through chronic ear infections, but best of all, stay ahead of them and prevent them in the future. We don't treat, we don't cure, we don't take care of the, we take care of the actual root cause and the dysfunction within the nerves, within the muscles, within the immune system. So if you're looking to get all the way to the root cause of your child's chronic ear infections and get to the website, learn more information. And the moment you're ready to get your kiddo healing and through to the other side of these challenges without drugs and surgery, book your appointment, give us a call, get scheduled, and get your child healthy again. God bless, be well. I hope this helped you and served you. And if it did, please like it, follow us, subscribe to us. If you found it on YouTube, please share this video with other parents who, their kiddos are going through ear infections. We would love this information to go far and wide, because it's just time that the whole theory of medicine that says it's just bad luck, and it's time we replace that with the real truth and the real neuroscience. So please share this video as well. God bless.